Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Blaze the Cat here, and I am back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance version as a remake. So, last time, we basically did manage to fully complete the 7th world in the game, which appears to be taking place in Razor Ridge. Now, despite the fact I wasn't still a big fan of the forms of, confused cliffs, because obviously though that level is very frustrating, but regardless to such though, thankfully throughout the majority of the world, as far as I do realize, it did end up being pretty alright. And it's also worth knowing for too, we did somehow manage to able to fight against a new boss, which is actually only exclusive to this version of the game, which appears to be Croctopus. So because of that, despite the fact that we actually did manage to able to use the bombs to hit him, well, here's the thing though, because we need to let him usually touch these bombs in order to able to actually get him damaged. So because of that though, yeah, we did manage to deal with that fight alright. I mean, I did fail for about twice, but that's mainly because this is all new to me and everything. But regardless of such though, thankfully though, that particular world, like I said before, is basically done and over with. So because of that, yeah, today for this video is that we are going to be heading over into the 8th world in Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance version. And here we go, on to Kaos course. So because of that, for the most part, the levels themselves in this particular version of the game, in this world specifically, is pretty much straightforward, much like the forms of how it does in the original Super Nintendo version. But obviously, because of the forms of how the fact that I get the strong feeling that we are still technically not done in terms of Cranky's Dojo, and on top of that, as far as I'm aware, we've only got one more Swanky's Dash minigame left. So because of that, and I get the gut feeling for the fact that the last Swanky's Dash minigame is going to be a lot more tricky and difficult, which you'll see why if we dive into that particular subject. So because of that though, yeah, with that being said folks, it's about the fact that there's nothing else I can really say about this for the most part. I mean, generally speaking, it was about the fact that after all though, we can hopefully try to able to actually gather the next couple of those B coins until we're able to actually access to the 9th and the final world in this particular version of the game. So, and like I said before, is that throughout the majority of the uploading schedules in Donkey Kong Country 3, for the Game Boy Advance version, as far as I do know, is actually pretty self-explanatory. Like, no need for two-parter in each world, unlike the forms of how it does it in Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Game Boy Advance, because, there's a lot to do in that particular version as well, ranging from Espresso Racing, and of course, quiz games that we need to able to go through, and on top of all that stuff, though, just, well, anything else in general, likely to try to get these little, camera pictures and all that stuff. So because of that, gee, no wonder why that this game decides able to remove the camera items this time around. So, but anyway, so yeah, a couple of things I want to mention to you all for something, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date, of course, there is the 29th of November today, in some cases in 2025 today, and yes, recently today, that we've somehow managed able to finish watching ourselves Zootropolis 2 on the cinema. And what's my final thoughts of the film? Well, again, no spoilers mentioned by the way, and I'm gonna say, I can easily recommend the film. Easily, no contest. Especially noticeable that unlike, let's just say last year's Moana 2, it feels a bit all over the place when it comes to opinions related, although I still have not seen Moana 2 in my whole entire experience, because mind you though, I haven't exactly go around to it. So mind you though, I will seriously able to actually try to recommend Zootropolis 2 or Zootopia 2 for those of you who lived in North America. So because of that though, and for my score department though, I would say I might as well give it a 9 out of 10, because I was originally going to able to try to give it a 10 out of 10, but of course, that film in particular is going to play it safe. So because of that though, I'm sure about the fact that there's going to be a lot of fans out there was expecting to really enjoy the film, myself included. So because of that though, again, no spoilers for the time being, just because that film did recently came out yesterday for those of you who lived in the UK. So in fact, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day. What was your thoughts about the films of Zootropolis 2 after seeing it on a big screen, specifically either theater or cinema, depending on what region you lived in? And like I said before, I had a really great time watching the film, and I'm seriously really looking forward to rewatching that film again when that comes out on DVD at some point or another, until sometime in next year, in terms of 2026. I would say it's more specifically in March or April. It's hard for me to judge on that front, because mind you though, it has been quite some time since we've last mentioned about the forms of certain updates, in terms of not only DVD release dates, but in addition to Blu-ray DVD releases as well. Because mind you though, as for this particular point as far as I'm aware, sorry for a little bit of a tongue twisting by the end folks, but regardless of such, I get the feeling that we just literally got about 5 more days to go until Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for Nintendo Switch 1, as well as Nintendo Switch 2 version is going to be on its way. And of course, like we've already established in the past, we made the final decision to go for the Switch 2 edition, because, relatively speaking, not only because of reduced loading times, but on top of that, the graphics itself looks spectacular on Nintendo Switch 2, and you pretty much get the idea about the fact that there's a lot of people out there, whilst expecting to try to able to actually buy the Nintendo Switch 2 edition for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, so I guess that makes it pretty obvious, similar to the forms of how it does it back in October, when most people attempt to buy the Switch 2 edition for Pokemon Legends ZA, because improved frame rate, and of course better graphics, although not that impressive in my book, but regardless of such though, yeah, you can pretty much get the idea of that similar structure for able to actually go for the current generation as opposed to the previous generation of those specific types of games like this. So, anyway, let's move on to the next level, which appears to be Creepy Caverns, not to be confused as the actual board's name from Mario Party 3. In some cases though, I must admit it though right away, that while looking back in Creepy Caverns as a board itself in Mario Party 3, it is still perhaps one of my least favorite boards in the game, just because, although don't get me wrong, I do like the aesthetics, but it's just that trying to play for the entire board just feels a little bit time consuming to me. Although regardless of such though, it's about the fact that we can able to expect to realize that, well, it's hard for me to talk about that particular subject though really, but regardless of such though, because even then, it's been quite some time since we've last mentioned about something related to Mario Party, since that Maxi has already finishing up the entirety of Super Mario Party Jamboree with Jamboree TV Switch 2 edition, so because of that, yeah, you can get the idea. So, anyway, oh, and speaking of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond though, is that we actually got ourselves a full-on confirmation about the forms of amiibo functionality and to see what the actual effects can do. Like for instance though, if you do manage to able to scan in Samus Metroid Prime 4 variation amiibo, this will actually functions as 3 different factors. You can now change the background music when riding Vola in Salviti, I think it's what it says anyway. And once per day, you can activate a shield that will block up to 99 damage. And then on top of that, when the shield is active, Samus's life is also restored to full. So because of that, I guess I get the feeling that unlike Metroid Dread or Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS, I don't think it's possible they were able to actually mention about the forms of not only you can able to actually get an additional energy tank, but in addition to that though, the missile expansion kit or something like that. I mean, mind you though, it has been a very long while since we last played something Metroid related, because after all, since almost 2 years ago, that we actually did done Metroid Zero mission for the Game Boy Advance, all thanks to the forms of, Jewel. So hopefully though, specifically until next year, we'll try to figure something else, in regards to the forms to try to do some more Let's Plays in the near future, including some other surprises here and there, which we can't discuss on that front right about now, plus mainly because, we are finally going to be going back on playing through Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance for the time being, just in time before, Christmas is just around the corner. And speaking of Christmas in general, we got about 26 days to go until Christmas Day is going to be happening for the likes of 2025. And on top of all that stuff though, we got about, I would say, if I'm not mistaken, I think we got about, I would say 33 days to go until, we're about to be approaching ourselves into 2026, the brand new year. So because of that though, in fact, still, no matter what though, we should probably save more topics more about the forms of the upcoming year 2026 until later on. So for now on though, let's go ahead and try to be very careful around here, because we actually come across into ghost barrels. So, yeah, taking a notice from the likes of the ghost ropes obstacles from the likes of in the second game, although the noticeable difference is this time is that it's all about barrel blasting as opposed to climbing onto the specific rope. So because of that though, yeah, you can get the idea with that similar concept as in Donkey Kong Country 2, but taking place in a different level theme, as you probably already can tell. So because of that, yeah, with that being said, we're now on to 80 B coins, so yeah, looking good progress on it so far. And by that time, once we make our way to the last boss in this world, then we should able to actually come to expect that we might able to actually carry up to like 87 B coins in total at this point in time. Although, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, again, we'll talk more details about the forms of other subjects and during at some point until probably by tomorrow, because I don't think it's possible we can able to actually try to fully complete everything in this game in the forms of in this week. But regardless of such, though, hopefully by next week, then we should miraculously try to able to actually conclude Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance before we move along to other last couple of Let's Plays, including some continuation parts of Mario Luigi Superstar Saga until specifically at some point in next month. But then again though, we can't tell for surely just yet, because even then, like I said before, we're getting very close towards the end of November before we move along to the 12th and the final month of 2025. And let me tell you, I'm actually really looking forward to able to go into 2026, by the way, because let me tell you, I have to be brutally honest here, I'm honestly not a big fan of 2025 as a year itself. I mean, there are some positives I can probably think about, but even then, again, we'll let Maxie will mention more about that subject until specifically, the final Let's Play of 2025, which, again, that'll be a discussion for later. So because of that, there we go. It does take me a couple of tries to able to actually try and knock down that coin enemy right there, but regardless of such though, thankfully we did manage to able to solve this. So, anywho, there's also another thing else I want to point out too, in regards to the forms of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, is that I've also realized about something, that obviously though, for the fact that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, as a game itself, was expecting, if I can recall, although I might be mistaken, that as far as I can definitely tell, for the fact that it actually also brings not only one, but 3 difficulty options, very similar to the forms of how it does it in, well, most games nowadays, ranging from Metroid Dread, and on top of all that stuff though, I don't know if it's possible with the forms of Metroid Prime Remastered or something. Oh, and by the way, if you manage to able to do a figure 8, or specifically infinite, when it comes to more accurately trying to swim around those little stones, then obviously though, this allows you to able to actually access to the next cave. So because of that, wow. That is by far is the easiest pattern sequence I have to put up with, because in the last few button presses is all about right. So, thanks game, I fully appreciate about that with all that easiest combination, because let me tell you, I'm not exactly a greatest memorization in the world, but regardless of such though, it knows what it is, I suppose. So anyway, speaking of such, let's go ahead and try to deal with some more Cranky's Dojo once again, so we can able to once again try to block these little enemies from left and right here and there. So anyway, now as far as these 3 difficulties in Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will be expected to become like this. Like right from the start though, I'm pretty sure that you're able to actually access to casual and normal modes from the start. But if you remember from the likes of in Metroid Zero Mission for the Game Boy Advance, for instance, you do able to actually also unlock the 3rd difficulty level, which appears to be hard mode. So I'm pretty sure that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, that you were able to actually come across into hard difficulty level, and to unlock that, you do need to beat the game in normal mode. So it's actually remarkably similar to the forms of how it does it for Metroid Zero Mission in terms of that particular unlockable method, by the way. So just in case if you're up for the challenge later on, or to be more specifically on your next playthrough as far as I'm aware, then by all means you can able to actually do just that. So anyway, let's move on to the next level, which appears to be Lightning Lookout. Oh boy, this level is going to be really tough, especially because this level's gimmick involves around lightning itself. So because of that, make sure to take cover, by the way, because otherwise, if you get struck by lightning, then you lose one of your Kongs, or worst of all, death. So because of that, you have to watch out for that. Also, you need to watch out for is a lot of water, because if you get struck by lightning while you're swimming in water, you also get hurt or even death. So yeah, this particular level is just so brutal whenever I first heard about it, especially because considering for the fact that not only because you need to pay attention to the visual cue to see the actual lightning strike is about to strike at, but it's also about the fact you need to be like, you know, take cover and all that stuff, and also be very quick at the same time, likely trying to swim out of the water, because otherwise though, that yeah, you get electrocuted if you somehow manage to get a lightning strike while you somehow manage to swim in water. So yeah, I can definitely tell that this level is very brutal. So yep, and somehow I got lightning strike right there, but that's okay, because after all, we've already come across into a first bonus area, so at least it's not too bad, all things considered. So, in fact, talking of which, when it comes to bonus areas in particular, it seems that we're basically almost done when it comes to fighting every single bonus areas in this whole entire game, basically. So because of that, though, yeah, I can't believe it's actually getting ridiculously close, doesn't it? Especially noticeable because, like I said before, the actual uploading schedules for Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance is, quite frankly, very self-explanatory, especially noticeable about the fact that luckily we don't have to worry about the forms of mini-games for the time being, until specifically at the end game, basically, because straight to the point, that as soon as we're able to actually gather every single DK coins in this game, that I'm sure enough that we can able to actually access to not only the fourth and the final vehicle, but also straight to the point, every time whenever you do manage to able to unlock a new vehicle, for instance, you're able to actually access to one of those challenges. Specifically though, like, I'm pretty sure it is definitely possible you can able to actually try to tackle for the first minigame challenge when you first start the game, and then, well, because I was assuming if I was trying to go for that routine, but I didn't get a chance to, so, because obviously though, I always tend to prefer trying to do some bit of platforming here and there, as opposed to trying to tackle for the minigame from the start, so, but anyway, and the next thing I want to talk about this for the sake of time is that, well, for those of you who lived in North America, happy 20th anniversary of the game's release of Mario Luigi Partners in Time for the Nintendo DS, which still, I can't even believe time really does fly, despite the fact that most people complain about the forms of the linear structure in terms of Mario Luigi Partners in Time compared to the forms of how it does it not only in Superstar Saga, but in addition to Bowser's Inside Story, and of course Dream Team Brothers, and most recently, as far as I'm aware, with Mario Luigi Brothership, although I may be wrong, but regardless as such though, because yes, in Partners in Time, there's a lot of leniency, which as a result, it does remind me like a similar concept, as in, not only Metroid Fusion with its non-narrowly, but it's also about the fact that this could be also applies with Metroid Prime 3 Corruption for the Wii, because between those two Metroid games in particular, they do obviously incorporate a linear structure, so because of that, we're likely trying to go from like one place to the other or something like that. I mean, relatively speaking though, you pretty much get the idea of what I was expecting, especially because thanks to Tiana did somehow already tackle through Metroid Fusion since also in 2023, so regardless as such though, it's about the fact that, again, hopefully though, we'll get around on doing some more Metroid stuff in the near future. So for now, let's go ahead and finish the level, despite we are missing something, which appears to be the DK coin. So regardless as such though, we need to hit back into this level again, hopefully for the final time, so just in case we want to get this level done and over with, before we move along to the next couple of stages. And still, regardless of the forms of some trial and error situations from time to time, it looks like for the fact that no matter what though, we breezily win for this world quite comfortably. I mean, straight to the point though, because certain stages can go by a little bit trickier, and it's also kind of lengthy too. So regardless of such though, it really doesn't matter if we do manage to able to like try to complete the levels as quickly as we could. Well, also at the same time though, it's all about patience sometimes. So I mean, even then, unlike the forms of how it does in Donkey Kong Land 3, that if you really want to go for a true 100% ending, you have to go for the entire time attack mode in order to be able to finish the job. So, yeah, you can get the idea for that. And as you can tell, we accidentally died, because that's okay, because even then we somehow got the DK hero coin, or just a DK coin in general, so that way we should able to don't mind taking a death after claiming the DK coin. So how about that? Anyway, so now let's move on to the next level in this world. So this basically means is that we now come across into coin dozers. So because of that though, yeah, if you get pushed or shoved into the bottomless pit, you die instantly. So because of that though, this is where things gets a little bit tricky. Well, again, if you do manage to able to use Kitty Kong, then you might have a hard time with. Whilst unlike Dixie Kong, that you might have an easier time with, because you know, with the ponytail ability and stuff like that. So anywho though, there's also another thing else I want to point out too, is that I've noticed something. There's going to be some more gadgets that's going to be on its way for Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and it's going to be happening and during at some point on December 3rd. So because of that, well, now, as far as I can definitely tell, according to what it says on the article right there, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds getting new gadgets to be revealed in next update. So as a result, and I'm very curious to know what these gadgets are. It could be either be double item slots, or specifically additional item, or additional ring symbol, or especially noticeable, it did somehow show us the shield thing, which I can't tell for surely just yet. But regardless of such though, I am super duper curious of what these gadgets are, especially noticeable. Again, we'll have to wait until specifically until December 3rd. So I guess we'll have to wait for a little while. So anyway, the next thing I want to point out too is that Nintendo Switch application has managed able to receive a new version update, and this time what appears to be version 3.2.0, and they did only address quite a number of things here and there, like the app no longer supports iOS versions proper to iOS 16, so iOS devices must have iOS 16 or later to be compatible with this app. This app no longer supports Android versions before Android 9. This app requires Android 9 or newer versions, so I guess that makes it pretty obvious they have to require us to able to actually bring up the updated versions on several other aspects. So yeah, I guess that makes it pretty obvious. And the next thing they did point out is the notification received when a friend comes online has been updated to include the name of the software they are using if applicable. And on top of that, you can now send friend requests to users while you've chatted within the game chat session on Nintendo Switch 2. And on top of that, you can now copy the hashtags for a software title. This can be done from the details for the screenshots or video. And as also, you can now create a Nintendo Switch app album on or in the iOS Photos app, so that's something. And to use this feature, enable it from settings in this app. And they also fix an issue that sometimes caused the order of screenshots and videos to change when downloading several at once. So yeah, I guess they somehow fixed that. And finally, most notably though, other small bug fixes that have also been made. So yeah, I guess that's all there is to it basically. And one of the subjects when it comes to likely patch updates for something Nintendo related is that Pokemon Legends EA also receives a new version update, which appears to be version 1.0.3, and they've only addressed it two things specifically, which appears to be in ranked battles, even if you reach the rank required to receive Mega Stones as rewards, you may not be able to receive item. This occurred in Season 2, and then in response to players who did not receive the Mega Stone award in Ranked Battle Season 2, players who were unable to receive their rewards due to this issue occurring during Ranked Battle Season 2 will be able to receive them by displaying the Ranked Battle screen after the update data is released. So yeah, I guess it's gonna be one of those scenarios where there's like a technical bug when it comes to not receiving stuff, but regardless of such though, at least I fully appreciate that particular bug fix has now been addressed. So anywho, And the next thing I want to point out, speaking of something anniversaries related, happy 25th anniversary of the game's release of Banjo-Tooie for the Nintendo 64. Specifically, if I could recall correctly, in North America or something like that. I mean, mind you though, the European version doesn't come out until at some point on April 2001. So no matter what though about the fact, I can totally see why, for the fact that there are quite a few games do not make it to the European version until much later. So, anywho, and the next thing I want to point out too is that I'm actually going back on playing through Super Mario Run recently, and because of that, recently there's actually a brand new event that's going to be happening just recently, and that's what appears to be the Super Mario Galaxy plus Super Mario Galaxy 2 event. So no matter what though, they somehow once again did manage to bring up not only more statues, but in addition to more gold statues as well. And those statues can be based off from B. Mario, in addition to Rosalina and Luma with the actual storybook, and finally Blimp Yoshi with Mario based off from Super Mario Galaxy 2. So I guess that makes it pretty obvious about the fact that why that event is now a thing, although still, regardless of such though, I still have to go through that particular Toad Rally mode, which means that I have to do more consecutive wins in a row, so because of that, nothing new or ordinary or anything else like that ever since Donkey Kong Bonanza event, since sometime in July, but regardless of such though, that's as far as I was expecting. So anyway, let's move on to Poisonous Pipeline. So as you can tell, the main gimmick about this level right here is that your controls is actually be reversed, like assuming if you go into the actual poison water. So thankfully you're not suffocating for it, but more specifically, your controls are somewhat reversed. Well, except with up and down, because up and down is basically normal, whilst compared to left and right, they're all basically switched over. So because of that, we have to try to get used to with the forms of mirrored controls at one point, but I'm sure we basically got this at the end, because even then, because we pretty much know exactly what to expect, so... But anyway, the next thing I want to point out too is that I've noticed something, that the Switch 2 Pro controller is now going to be compatible with Steam now, so I guess that seems pretty cool. Along with the forms of the GameCube controller support for Nintendo Switch 2 is now going to be usable on Steam, so yeah, I guess that's totally random. But regardless of such though, it works either way. So anyways, back into what I was saying about the forms of Metroid Prime 4 Amiibo support. I already mentioned about one thing in particular, which is of course Samus alone, based off from Metroid Prime 4 variation of that amiibo, but there's also with the forms of Samus and Valor bike accessory thing from the likes of that amiibo, and these functions can be summed up as like this. You will be able to change the color of Valor, and on top of that, every time you touch your amiibo, you can check Valor's total distance traveled, so I guess that's something. And finally, most notably though, once per day, you can increase the rate at which Valor's boost energy regenerates. So, yeah, I guess that's that. And lastly, we have is Silex, which is basically like the main antagonist of, you know, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, as far as you can definitely tell. But anywho, in terms of that amiibo can do, is that they only address two things, unlike the forms of how it does it for the other two amiibos, as I mentioned earlier. So anyway, in terms of two effects specifically with that amiibo, which it does summarize as like this. After clearing the game, you'll be able to see the full versions of the movies that are shown in fragments throughout the game. Even if you don't have the amiibo, which I don't think I can probably get that, you can watch the full version of the movie by achieving a 100% scan rate and item collecting rate. So because of that, it's going to be remarkably similar to the forms of not only Metroid Prime 1, but as well as Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and of course Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. So because of that, yeah, nothing new when it comes to that particular format, when it comes to, you know, unlocking something a little bit of a specialty. So anyway, and finally, every time you touch your amiibo, you'll hear a random line from Silex. So yeah, I guess that's all there is to it basically. So because of that, yeah, I'm very curious to know about the fact. Oh yeah, there's also technically one last thing I want to mention about in regards to the forms of the Samus, or specifically Metroid themed amiibos, ranging from any Metroid series of amiibos can be summed up as like not only Samus from Super Smash Bros. Series, in addition to Zero Suit Samus and Ridley especially, and heck, even especially noticeable with Dark Samus amiibo as well. This pretty much only functions one thing, and that's what appears to be the game sounds are randomly playing, or specifically, the game sounds are played randomly. So because of that, yeah, that's as far as they've got. So anyway, the next thing I want to point out too is that I get the strong sense of feeling, actually though, is that I've also realized that Cyberpunk 2077 has now recently reached 35 million copies worldwide. So as a result, likely a combination of not only the PS4 version as well as the Xbox One version at launch, as it didn't run very well, although it does tend to get a lot more buggy mess with the previous generation versions. And however though, the PS5, Xbox Series X, and PC versions are fairly highly regarded, especially the the Phantom Ripley downloadable expansion, and on top of that, also the Switch 2 edition, or the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077. Although it's hard for me to talk about that particular subject because it has been quite some time since we mentioned about that topic. So anyway, and there's also another thing else I'd like to point out too, is that yes, apparently though, that during the phones have been let's say a couple of days back, that there are some not one, but 3 or 4 familiar, well actually kind of think about it, it was actually roughly 3 actually, that 3 of those balloons we might able to recognize thanks to the forms of the Thanksgiving Day, which it already did happen since about a couple of days back. And those balloons in particular are not only SpongeBob SquarePants, no surprise there, and on top of that, Pac-Man, which is pretty cool, considering about the fact that that one marks the 45th anniversary of Pac-Man, and of course, most notably though, Mario was now appeared, which as a result, it did somehow predicted that since, you know, after celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise. So because of that, yeah, it seems pretty cool. Speaking of Mario though, that yes, before you managed able to watch Zootropolis 2 on the big screen, yes, I did manage able to recently rewatch the Super Mario Galaxy movie trailer just before the actual film starts, and still, I'm very, very excited about this, especially noticeable because, you know, it's been almost 3 years since the first film came out. So because of that, and yeah, I got nothing else to say about this, I suppose. But then again, I'm probably not going to mention any spoilers for the time being, not only for Zootropolis 2, but eventually at some point until next year, in regards to the films of the Super Mario Galaxy movie as well. So because of that, and by that time, as far as I do notice, I'm simply basically done watching any other films on the big screen in terms of 2025. And I know you guys are probably wondering, what about the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants? And heck, even especially noticeable with the new Avatar film is going to be on its way too, and that's what it appears to be. Avatar, Fire and Ash. And it is also worth noting for too, there's also Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie as well. I would say for the fact that I might have to wait on that for quite some time, although I won't expect things too much, able to actually get some high expectations with those films in particular. Although I'm sure enough though, during at some point in near Christmas time, I bet there's a lot of people out there are expecting to be hyped about the new Avatar film since 2022 with the films of A Way of Water, so it's no surprise there, considering how the original film did so well, and on top of that, the sequel also did very, very well as well, so I'm pretty sure it might be on the exact same scenario as the third film in the series. So it's pretty crazy kind of think about it with all that. You know, a lot of money has been summed up as such or something like that. But anyway, here we go on to Castle Kaos right away, and as you can tell, we are fighting against with this particular machinery thing, since in Mechanos, but only this time around though is actually a lot more easier as far as I do realize, although we do need able to require us able to actually use the barrel to deal the amount of damage to this particular machine right there, and of course we still have to watch out for quite a number of attacks in its disposal, ranging from the actual flames, and also on top of that, the bombs decided able to get tossed out of it though, of this particular machine contraption. So because of that, now I'm pretty sure we're basically done with this part right there. And straight to the point, oh jeez, it looks like we somehow come across to the Wizard of Oz reference. Well, I'm not entirely sure how do I think about it though, because again, it's been quite a while since I actually have last played this, because ever since in yesterday and the day after, that I essentially did manage to enjoy my time revisiting Super Monkey Ball Jr., but only experiencing the party games portion, ranging from Monkey Bowling and of course Monkey Golf as well. So we can pretty much expect to realize about the fact that I'm not entirely sure if it's possible that specifically until next year, that for the fact that we already know that Super Monkey Ball might expect it to be celebrating its 25th anniversary at some point next year, although I'm not entirely sure about that point yet though, although either way, we'll mention more about that in a later time. So because of that, yeah, let's go and take care of the forms of the next part of the fight. So even then, we can pretty much guarantee for the fact that we can able to kick his butt no problem. So either way, and it's also worth knowing for too is that I also did manage to find out that Assassin's Creed Shadows for Nintendo Switch 2 version, unfortunately though, that game is going to be only running on 30 frames per second. And on top of that, there's also going to be VRR always active, and on top of that there's also baked GI, and finally DLSS, which I'm not exactly sure what that stands for exactly, because I'm not exactly a huge expert when it comes to knowing any other aspects like these ones. So because of that, and it's also worth knowing for too, is that I've also did manage to find out something about this too, that I somehow managed able to unfortunately do realize that unfortunately I'm about to be going back on playing through Mario Kart Tour again, but regardless of such though, because I'm still not a big fan of the Team Rally system. But still, fortunately enough though, as you probably would expect, that we've just recently managed to unlock Doom Shadow as part of the Forms of the Collaboration event from the likes of Sonic X Shadow Generation. So because of that though, and of course next up in the lineup is obviously Reindeer Knuckles, and then after that it will be Reckonox Silver. So because of that, and that'll be about it, at least for now, in terms of Sonic Dash events. So anywho, the next thing I want to classify for something about this too, there's this YouTuber out there, which appears to be the Sharkinator 1000. Apparently though, he decided able to restart his entire Let's Play of Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World somehow. I'm not entirely sure what's happening to it though, when it comes to the forms of the previous recording sessions of this part. I mean, mind you though, it's about the fact that it has been quite some time since I actually did manage to watch his particular Let's Plays from time to time, especially because at that point in time too, for the fact that Stuart, or CapKing74 if you will, that he's basically almost finishing up Luigi's Hidden Mansion. So because of that, and all straight to the point though, is about the fact that at this point in time he does need to able to actually grind technically one more Boo left in order to able to actually access the final battle against with King Boo. But at the moment right now, he's now going to be probably going to be focusing on optional ghosts, ranging from one of them in floor 2, and I suppose generally 2 of them from the likes of in floor 3, although I may be wrong, because mind you though, it has been quite some time since I actually have last played Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube version specifically. So because of that, because you know, Halloween has already been finished since about a couple of months back, so but I digress. Now I suppose there's technically one last thing I want to mention about in regards to the forms of today's discussion, is that I'm pretty sure there's a film out there which it already seemed to exist since like, you know, 1985, and apparently though, that particular film has now officially became let's say 40 years old recently, and one of those films in particular, which appears to be SS, stands for Sesame Street Presents, followed that bird. And no matter what though, yeah, I've never actually heard about that film before, but I do know for certain for one thing, unfortunately that film, while looking back, did somehow suffer poor box office performance. So yeah, no matter what though, I've got nothing else to say about that particular film, I suppose. I mean, it's likely a kid's film basically, that does feature the bird character from the Sesame Street series, so I've got no comments for the sake of time. Now I suppose technically, finally though, is that Nintendo actually acquires Bandai Namco Studios in Singapore. So this means, right, since that Nintendo decides able to acquire that, and that means it actually decided to rename it Nintendo Studios Singapore. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. So anyways, once you deal with the forms of the final battle, right there, obviously though we ended up in the credit sequence somehow. And it may look like that particular background right there looks a bit familiar to you, doesn't it? It's actually a remarkably similar background as the forms of the original Donkey Kong Country, specifically on the Game Boy Advance version specifically, because it did manage to take place in DK's house. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. But of course, as you probably already expect, the game itself is technically not over yet, because we still got not only the final world left, but in addition to that, we still need to be able to try to grind through as many of those B coins as we possibly could. And on top of that, we still need to be able to try to collect some more DK coins. And of course, most notably though, still need to be collecting some more banana birds, which I think at that point in time, I'm pretty sure we got about 5 more banana birds left, although I may be wrong, because mind you though, I didn't pay attention to the forms of the actual user interface or anything else like that. But regardless of such though, things get a lot more interesting until tomorrow, because well, straight to the point that we can actually now diving into the true final world in Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance, which making us a grand total of 9 worlds, or specifically, we're now going to be going into the 9th and the final world. So it's basically remarkably similar to not only Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii, but in addition to 3DS version on the 3D, and of course recently the HD version on the Nintendo Switch. So as you can see on screen, we are now on Average Ape. So as a result, I think we ended up in 4th place so far, and there's no way I'm not gonna catch up to Cranky Kong's time right there, because he somehow managed to beat the game for about 4 hours, which, let me tell you, it is virtually impossible, I must admit, especially because of all that trial and error situations, as I mentioned this earlier. So anyway, so before we end off the video right there, you notice there's actually not 1, but 4 stones on that particular spot of the actual water like this. Well, in order to be able to actually access to the 9th and the final world in the game, we need to go around the circles all around those 4 rocks, and if you do it for about a couple of times, then you should miraculously try to able to actually activate the 9th and the final world right there. So this means we now ended up in the lost world of any kind, so as a result, yeah, it feels like we're now onto the final stretch for reals, I suppose. So with that being said, folks, is that we should probably ending off this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Donkey Kong Country 3 for the Game Boy Advance version as a remake. Is that we're going into the 9th and the final world in the game, taking place in Kremoto. So yeah, that will be exciting. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.